The sun was just beginning to dip behind the tall buildings, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. She had been walking for hours, moving through her neighborhood on the way home from work. It had been an ordinary day, one like many others, filled with the usual routines and small worries. She thought about the groceries she needed to pick up, the chores waiting at home, and the simple hope for a quiet evening. Life had always felt a bit heavy, a little like she was carrying invisible weight on her shoulders. But she was used to it. Everyone had their burdens. As she turned a corner near a narrow alley, she heard a sound that made her freeze in her tracks. At first it was faint, almost like the wind whispering through the buildings, but then it became unmistakable. A tiny, desperate cry pierced the quiet of the evening. She stopped, her heart racing, and looked around. The alley was dim, shadowed by the walls of the nearby buildings, and she could see only a small, dark shape lying on the ground. Her first instinct was caution. She had been taught to be careful, to avoid danger, and yet something inside her pushed her forward. The crying was so urgent, so small, that she couldn't ignore it. She hurried toward the sound, her shoes clicking against the pavement, and as she drew closer, she saw the source. A baby, barely more than a few months old, curled up in what looked like a worn-out blanket. The child's eyes were wide and wet, the tiny fists moving helplessly in the air, reaching for something. Anyone. Her breath caught in her throat. How could someone leave a child here alone in the cold? Fear and worry gripped her at the same time. She looked around quickly, half expecting to see someone running toward her or returning to take the baby away. But there was no one. The alley was empty, silent except for the soft, urgent cries of the baby. She felt a surge of protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed, a fierce need to keep this little life safe. Kneeling down slowly, she reached out and gently lifted the baby from the ground. The child shivered in her arms, tiny hands clutching at her clothes. She wrapped the blanket more tightly around the baby, holding the warmth close, trying to offer comfort. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had to act quickly. She had no idea how long the baby had been there, or what dangers might have been nearby. All that mattered was that this small life depended on her. She stood there for a moment, cradling the baby and listening to the faint, uneven breaths. The city around her continued as if nothing had happened, people walking past without noticing the scene in the alley. But for her, everything had changed in that instant. She felt a connection she had never felt before, a bond formed in seconds but rooted in something deep and instinctive. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she couldn't leave the baby there. Her mind raced. Where could she take the child? Her apartment was small, barely enough for herself, and she didn't have much experience with babies. But she couldn't let fear or uncertainty stop her. She had to find safety, warmth, and help. She began walking briskly, her steps careful but urgent, scanning the streets for anyone who might be able to help, or a nearby place where she could shelter the baby. As she moved through the streets, she kept talking softly to the baby, trying to calm the trembling little body in her arms. Her voice was gentle, almost a whisper, but it seemed to help. The baby's cries softened, replaced by small hiccups and whimpers. She felt a strange mix of relief and worry, the kind that comes when a person knows they are doing the right thing, but aren't sure what will come next. Finally, she reached a small convenience store that was still open. The fluorescent lights inside flickered slightly, but it was warm compared to the chill outside. She stepped inside, clutching the baby to her chest, and approached the counter. The cashier looked up, surprised by her sudden appearance, but when she explained the situation, his expression changed to concern. Without hesitation, he offered her a chair in the back, a place where she could sit safely and keep the baby warm. She thanked him quietly and settled into the chair, still holding the baby close. She didn't know what to do next. Her thoughts spun with possibilities. Call the police, contact a hospital, find the baby's parents. But she also knew that time was critical. Every second mattered. She checked the baby again, making sure the child was breathing steadily, the tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The baby's eyes looked up at her, wide and trusting, and her heart swelled. She had to protect this child no matter what. The minutes passed slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. She tried to remain calm, though inside she was a whirlwind of worry and determination. She looked around the store, thinking about what resources she might have. There were a few snacks and drinks, but nothing for a baby. She didn't even have a proper blanket, only the thin one the baby had been wrapped in. Still, she held the child as tightly as she could, whispering soothing words, trying to convey comfort through her voice and touch. Her mind wandered briefly to her own childhood, to the times when she had longed for attention and care that wasn't always there. She realized that this small life in her arms had no choice, no safety, no one to depend on, until now. And somehow in that moment, she knew that she would do everything in her power to change that. She wasn't a parent, hadn't planned for this, but the decision didn't require planning. It was instinct, pure and simple. After what felt like hours, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She had to take the next step. Carefully, she left the convenience store, keeping the baby wrapped as securely as possible, and started walking toward the nearest police station. Every step was measured, every movement cautious. She knew that authorities would know what to do, that they could provide the help the baby needed. But she also knew that she would stay with the child until she was sure it was safe, that someone trustworthy was in charge. As she walked, she felt the eyes of strangers on her, some curious, some indifferent. She didn't care. The world around her faded into the background. There was only the baby, the soft warmth against her chest, the tiny, fragile weight of life in her arms. She whispered encouragements, little words of love and reassurance that she wasn't sure the baby understood. But she hoped the tone alone conveyed safety. Finally, she reached the station, heart hammering in her chest. She approached the front desk, and a uniformed officer looked up at her. She explained what had happened, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion inside. The officer nodded, immediately understanding the urgency. They led her to a private room where she could stay with the baby, while the necessary steps were taken. The sense of relief that washed over her was immense, though it was accompanied by lingering worry. She still didn't know the full story of how the baby ended up alone, what dangers had been faced or what lay ahead. Sitting in that small room, with the baby finally calm and safe, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. She looked down at the child, feeling a profound sense of responsibility and connection. Her life had changed in a single evening. She had not expected heroism or recognition, but now she understood what it meant to act purely out of compassion, to place another's life above her own comfort or fear. The hours that followed were a blur of questions, forms, and gentle reassurances. Social workers arrived, taking notes and asking her about the baby's condition. She answered honestly, recounting every detail, every observation. The baby remained in her arms, soothed by her presence, a tiny soul that had survived the odds through her courage and quick thinking. She felt an overwhelming mix of exhaustion and fulfillment, knowing that what she had done was simple yet profound. She had saved a life. As night fell and the city grew quieter, she sat back and allowed herself a moment of reflection. The ordinary routines of her life, the small worries and daily tasks, seemed distant now. She had faced something extraordinary, and in doing so had discovered something about herself she hadn't known before. She realized that courage wasn't always loud or grand. It could be quiet, instinctive, and deeply human. It was in reaching out to protect a tiny life, in acting without hesitation, in placing another being above oneself. She looked down at the baby one last time before the social workers gently took the child for care. The little eyes met hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a bond that needed no words. She felt a warmth in her chest, a profound sense of connection and purpose. She had stepped into the unknown and emerged not only as a savior for this tiny life, but as someone capable of deep, unshakable compassion. And even though she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She had made a difference, and that was enough to change everything. The next morning, she woke up feeling a mix of emotions. The night had been long and sleepless, filled with worry and hope. She couldn't stop thinking about the baby, wondering if the child was safe, warm, and cared for. The memory of holding that tiny, fragile life pressed against her chest stayed fresh in her mind. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, a combination of fear and something much deeper, connection. She knew that what she had done was more than a simple act. It had changed something inside her. She quickly got ready and went to a small cafe near her home. She needed to eat something, but mostly she needed a place where she could think. Her mind wandered back to the alley and the moment she had first heard the cries. She remembered the tiny fists, the wide, innocent eyes, and the way the child had clung to her. That memory made her heart ache and swell at the same time. She had saved a life, yes, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. What if something happened? What if she hadn't arrived in time? The thought made her stomach twist, and she shook it off as best she could. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the police station. She quickly opened it and saw that the baby was safe and had been taken to a hospital for care and observation. Relief washed over her, but it was tinged with an urge to know more. She needed to understand what had happened, why the baby had been left alone, and if there was anything she could do to help further. Her curiosity and concern kept her on edge, and she felt a strange pull toward the child that went beyond simple compassion. Without hesitation, she called the station. A calm voice answered, explaining that the baby was healthy, just a little cold and hungry, and that doctors and social workers were monitoring everything closely. They told her she could visit, but they needed to follow protocols and check identification before she could see the child. She agreed, understanding the importance of the rules, but her impatience grew. She wanted to see the baby, to ensure that everything was truly okay. She arrived at the hospital and was guided through the corridors to a small room where the baby was resting. The moment she stepped inside, her heart jumped. The baby, now wrapped in a soft blanket, looked up and made a small cooing sound. She approached carefully, gently placing a hand on the child's arm. The baby responded, a tiny smile forming as if recognizing her. Tears welled up in her eyes. In that instant, she felt a bond that went beyond words, beyond explanation. It was a connection that felt eternal. The nurses smiled at her, noticing her concern and the way she interacted with the baby. They explained that the child had been brought in by emergency services, found alone in the alley, and that they were in the process of searching for the family. While she listened, she felt both relieved and anxious. The baby was safe, yes, but she wondered about the circumstances that led to this moment. How had a life so small and precious ended up abandoned? She couldn't stop thinking about it. She spent hours at the hospital holding the baby, feeding it with help from the nurses and soothing it whenever it fussed. She had no formal training, but instinct guided her. Every small motion, every gentle whisper seemed to comfort the child. While she watched over the baby, she realized how fragile life was and how important her presence had become. The baby had no voice to ask for help, but her actions spoke volumes. It was a lesson she would never forget. News of her heroism began to spread. The hospital staff, impressed by her quick thinking and dedication, shared her story with local media. Soon reporters came to learn more about the woman who had rescued the baby. She was surprised and a little overwhelmed. She hadn't done it for recognition or praise. She had acted out of instinct, out of compassion. Still, the growing attention made her realize that what she had done was extraordinary, even if it felt natural to her. Despite the attention, she remained focused on the baby. Each day she visited the hospital, ensuring that the child was comfortable and cared for. She learned about the baby's basic needs, feeding schedules, and sleeping patterns. Every detail mattered, and she embraced the responsibility wholeheartedly. She began to notice small signs of improvement. The baby's cries became softer, the smiles more frequent, and the little hands started to explore the world around them. Each milestone, no matter how small, felt like a victory, a reassurance that she had done the right thing. As the days passed, authorities continued their search for the baby's family. She cooperated fully, providing all the details of where and how she had found the child. She answered questions patiently, even when they repeated themselves, understanding that every piece of information could help reunite the baby with its parents. Yet deep inside, she couldn't help but wonder if the family would even want the child back. Her heart ached at the thought of the baby's life being uncertain, at the possibility that this small soul might have experienced neglect or hardship. During this time, she also reflected on her own life. Her world had been simple, her days filled with ordinary routines, yet she realized that she had underestimated her own strength and courage. She had faced a situation that required bravery, quick thinking, and compassion, and she had risen to the occasion. It was empowering to realize that she could make a difference in someone else's life, even when she hadn't expected it. This sense of purpose filled a space in her heart she hadn't known was empty. One afternoon, while sitting in the hospital room, she received a call from a social worker. They informed her that the baby's family had been located. They were overwhelmed with gratitude and wanted to meet her to personally thank her. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had no idea what to expect. But the thought of meeting the family who had entrusted their child to her care filled her with anticipation. She wanted to make a good impression, but more than that, she wanted to ensure that the baby would be in safe hands moving forward. When the day arrived, she accompanied the social worker to a small meeting room. The family entered, and she could see the emotion on their faces. Tears welled in their eyes as they looked at the baby, and she understood immediately how much this child meant to them. They thanked her repeatedly, their voices shaking with gratitude. She felt a warm glow inside, a quiet satisfaction that she had done something truly meaningful. It wasn't about praise or recognition. It was about the impact she had made on a life so young and fragile. The meeting was filled with stories from the family, tales of their love for the child, and explanations for the momentary lapse that had led to the baby being alone. They expressed deep appreciation for her quick action and selflessness. She listened, feeling a mixture of relief, happiness, and humility. She had acted out of instinct and compassion, and now she saw the tangible effects of that decision. The baby's life was not only saved but surrounded by love and care. As she left the hospital that day, she reflected on the journey so far. What had started as an ordinary evening had turned into something extraordinary. She had discovered her own courage, learned the value of empathy, and witnessed firsthand the profound impact of human kindness. She had formed a bond with the baby that would never be forgotten, a connection that had changed her life as much as the child's. She realized that sometimes the smallest actions could lead to the greatest changes, and that true heroism often came from simple, selfless decisions. The experience also made her more aware of the world around her. She noticed the small needs of others, the overlooked moments of vulnerability, and the quiet opportunities to make a difference. She carried the lessons she had learned into her daily life, striving to act with compassion, awareness, and courage. The baby's cries in that alley had awakened something inside her, a reminder that life was fragile, and that even one person's actions could change the course of another's life forever. In the weeks that followed, she continued to check in, staying informed about the baby's well-being. The family invited her to remain a part of the child's life in a supportive role, a gesture that surprised and humbled her. She accepted, understanding that her bond with the baby was not something that would fade overnight. She had been there in a moment of crisis, and now she had the chance to continue contributing positively to the child's journey. Through it all, she remained grounded in the realization that her actions had been driven by something universal: compassion. She had acted without hesitation, guided by instinct and empathy, and the result had been nothing short of transformative. Her life had been ordinary, filled with routine and small struggles, but now it was intertwined with something greater. She had discovered the profound impact of caring for another, the strength that emerges when faced with responsibility, and the enduring connections that arise from selfless action. As she walked home one evening, thinking about everything that had happened, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The baby was safe, the family was grateful, and she had discovered something about herself she had never known. She had acted in a moment, yet the effects would ripple through many lives, including her own. And in that quiet realization, she understood that this was only the beginning of a journey, one filled with hope, opportunity, and the lasting impact of a single act of kindness. A few days after the baby had been safely reunited with the family, she received a letter that she never expected. The envelope was thick, its paper smooth and elegant, and inside was an invitation. It seemed almost unreal, like something out of a story she had only heard in movies. The family wanted to meet her again, but this time it was not at the hospital or a public place. They were inviting her to their home, a place they described as welcoming, warm, and filled with gratitude for what she had done. She held the letter in her hands for a long moment, unsure if this was a dream or reality. Her mind raced with curiosity and a little fear. Visiting a stranger's home, even one who owed so much to her courage, was a step into the unknown. She prepared carefully for the visit, thinking about what she might say and how she could express her gratitude for their appreciation. She wondered what kind of home they lived in, what kind of lives they led. She had never imagined stepping into a world so different from her own, a life that seemed distant from the simple routines she was used to, and yet she felt a pull, an instinct telling her that she needed to accept. The baby's well-being and the bond she had formed with the child had created something unique, and this meeting was part of that journey. When the day arrived, she took a deep breath and set out, following the directions from the letter. The streets changed as she walked, the familiar urban setting giving way to wider roads lined with tall, elegant houses. Her heartbeat quickened with each step. She felt nervous, unsure what awaited her, but also a strange sense of excitement. She had been thrust into a world she had never imagined, and yet she felt ready to embrace it. Arriving at the mansion, she paused at the grand entrance, her eyes wide at the sight before her. The building was magnificent, more beautiful than she could have imagined, surrounded by gardens and fountains. It was a place of elegance and comfort, the kind of home that spoke of warmth and generosity. She took a deep breath and rang the bell, her hand trembling slightly. When the door opened, she was greeted by the family herself. Their smiles were warm, genuine, and full of gratitude. They welcomed her in with open arms, and for a moment, she felt as though she had stepped into a different world entirely. Inside, the mansion was just as beautiful as the exterior. Light poured through large windows, reflecting off polished floors and luxurious furnishings. But despite the grandeur, the atmosphere was inviting and not intimidating. The family made her feel comfortable immediately, asking about her journey and her well-being. She felt a little overwhelmed by the kindness, but also touched by the sincerity in their voices and expressions. The baby, now safe and happy in their arms, was the center of the room, and she couldn't help but smile seeing the child thriving. As they all sat together, the conversation turned to the events of that night in the alley. She recounted the story carefully, describing her thoughts and actions as she found the baby. The family listened intently, nodding and occasionally expressing their amazement. She was surprised by how much they wanted to know, not only about what happened, but about her feelings, her instincts, and the courage that had guided her. In their questions, she sensed a deep appreciation that went beyond words, a gratitude that was heartfelt and real. They shared stories as well, telling her about their lives, the challenges they had faced, and the love they had for their child. It was a glimpse into a world she had only imagined from afar, a life filled with both challenges and blessings. She listened with fascination, learning about the small joys and struggles that came with caring for a young child. Their stories made her reflect on her own life, her routines, and her own small victories. She realized that courage and love existed in many forms, in actions big and small, and that every person had a role in shaping the lives around them. The family also expressed a desire to stay connected with her. They were impressed not only by her bravery, but by her kindness, humility, and genuine concern for their child. They saw in her someone who could offer positive influence, someone whose presence could bring additional care and stability to the baby's life. They invited her to visit whenever she liked, not as a formal guest, but as someone who was already part of the child's world. She felt honored, humbled, and a little overwhelmed by the generosity and trust they placed in her. As the afternoon continued, she explored the mansion with their guidance. Every room was filled with warmth, personal touches, and evidence of a family that valued comfort and love. She saw photos on the walls, artwork, and spaces filled with memories. It was clear that this was a home built not only with wealth, but with care, attention, and a commitment to family. She felt a sense of awe, but also a gentle comfort. Despite the difference in their circumstances, the connection she felt with the family was genuine and human. During her visit, she also had moments of quiet reflection. She thought about the night she had found the baby, the uncertainty, the fear, and the instinct that had guided her. She realized that every small decision, every action taken without hesitation, had led to this moment. Her courage and compassion had opened doors she never imagined, and she felt grateful for the chance to witness the positive impact of her choices. The experience made her consider her own life and dreams, possibilities that had seemed distant but now felt attainable. The family, noticing her curiosity, shared their hopes for the child's future and the ways they hoped to support her as well. They spoke of education, experiences, and values they wanted to instill. She listened carefully, offering her own thoughts and suggestions, feeling a part of the conversation, a part of something larger than herself. It was a rare and special feeling, one of inclusion, trust, and shared responsibility. She realized that this was more than just gratitude. It was an invitation into a community, a life enriched by connection and care. As the day drew to a close, they all gathered in the garden. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the mansion and the surrounding greenery. She held the baby once more, feeling the small weight in her arms, the steady breathing, and the growing sense of security and love. The family thanked her again, their voices filled with emotion. She smiled, feeling a quiet joy and fulfillment that went beyond words. The experience had touched her deeply, leaving a mark on her heart that she knew would remain forever. Walking home that evening, she reflected on everything she had seen and experienced. The mansion, the family, the warmth, and the gratitude. It all felt surreal yet profoundly real. She realized that life sometimes offered unexpected moments that could change everything if one acted with courage, compassion, and an open heart. She thought about the baby, now safe and loved, and felt a deep sense of connection and purpose. She had not only saved a life, but had also entered a new chapter, one filled with opportunities, friendships, and the possibility of growth she had never imagined. The invitation to the mansion had done more than provide a meeting place. It had opened a window into a world of generosity, gratitude, and human connection. She understood that wealth or luxury was not the only measure of a meaningful life. The true value was in the care, trust, and relationships that one built. And in that realization, she felt a quiet strength, a readiness to embrace whatever came next. Her journey, once ordinary, was now filled with promise, discovery, and the profound impact of a single courageous act. After her first visit to the mansion, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. She started receiving more invitations to return, not just to see the baby, but to meet other members of the family and their close friends. Each visit was a mixture of wonder, excitement, and learning. She had never been in a place so full of warmth, comfort, and genuine kindness. The family's openness made her feel included, not as a guest, but as a trusted presence in their lives. She realized that the bond she had formed with the baby had grown into a connection with the family itself. During these visits, she noticed the way the family interacted with one another. They were caring, patient, and full of love, and they treated her with the same respect and warmth. She saw how they nurtured the baby, teaching gently, guiding firmly, and loving unconditionally. It was inspiring, and it reminded her of the importance of patience, understanding, and empathy in everyday life. She began to reflect on her own habits and ways of interacting with people, recognizing how small acts of kindness could make a big difference. One afternoon, the family invited her to join them for a simple activity in the garden. They wanted to show her how much they valued her presence, not just as the person who had saved the baby, but as someone who brought a unique energy and warmth into their home. They spent the day planting flowers, watering the garden, and talking about their dreams and experiences. She laughed more than she had in a long time, feeling a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. For the first time, she realized that life could hold joy beyond the ordinary routines and challenges she had known. The baby's presence added a new dimension to these visits. She learned to read the small signs and expressions, understanding the little ways the child communicated needs and emotions. She discovered that even the smallest gestures, a smile, a hand reaching out, a soft coo, could bring immense joy. She found herself becoming more patient, attentive, and gentle. Every moment with the baby was a lesson in love and care, and she cherished the opportunity to be part of this growth. The family, in turn, encouraged her to share her own dreams and experiences. They listened attentively as she spoke about her life, her goals, and the things she had once thought were unattainable. Their reactions were encouraging and sincere, helping her to see that her ambitions were valid and achievable. She realized that her courage and compassion had opened doors not only to the baby's life, but to her own potential. It was a revelation, a reminder that small, selfless actions could lead to opportunities that changed everything. Over time, she became more involved in the family's daily routines. She helped with small tasks, learned about the baby's schedule, and offered support wherever needed. Her presence became a source of comfort and stability for the child, and she felt proud of the role she was playing. She discovered a sense of purpose that went beyond simple acts of kindness. She was contributing to a nurturing environment where love, care, and attention flourished. The impact of her actions was tangible, and she felt fulfillment in a way she had never known before. One day, the family invited her to a special gathering at the mansion. It was a celebration of gratitude, where friends and relatives came to acknowledge her courage and the positive influence she had on their lives. She felt nervous at first, unsure of how to navigate this new social setting. But as the event progressed, she realized that the warmth and sincerity of the people around her made everything feel natural. Conversations flowed easily, smiles were shared, and she found herself laughing and enjoying the company of people who genuinely cared. During the gathering, she met individuals who had been inspired by her story. Some shared their own experiences, expressing how her actions encouraged them to be more attentive, kind, and courageous in their own lives. She was humbled by their words, understanding that one act of bravery could ripple outward, affecting people far beyond the initial moment. It was a powerful realization, and it reinforced her belief in the importance of compassion, empathy, and courage. The family also introduced her to projects and activities they were involved in, particularly initiatives focused on helping children in need. They invited her to participate, to share her insights and contribute her energy to causes that mattered. She felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond her personal connection with the baby. She was now part of a broader mission, one that sought to make a positive difference in the lives of many. This opportunity brought a new layer of fulfillment, combining her compassion with meaningful action. As the days turned into weeks, she noticed changes in herself. She felt more confident, capable, and self-assured. The experiences she had shared with the family and the baby had strengthened her resilience and expanded her perspective. She had learned to trust her instincts, embrace challenges, and act with courage even in uncertainty. Each visit to the mansion reminded her of the power of kindness, the importance of human connection, and the potential for ordinary people to create extraordinary impact. One evening, as she sat quietly in the garden with the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, she reflected on the journey so far. The initial act of rescuing the child had seemed like a small, instinctive decision, but its consequences had been profound. She had entered a world she had never imagined, formed meaningful connections, and discovered strengths within herself she had never recognized. The mansion, the family, and the opportunities now before her were not merely gifts. They were reflections of the choices she had made and the values she had embodied. The family noticed her reflection and spoke gently, acknowledging the courage, compassion, and humility she had shown. They emphasized that her actions had gone beyond saving a life. She had become a part of their extended family, a trusted and cherished presence. Their words warmed her heart, reinforcing the sense of belonging and connection that had been growing steadily. She realized that this relationship was built not on wealth or status, but on trust, gratitude, and genuine care. Her involvement in the baby's life continued to grow. She became a regular visitor, someone who could offer guidance, comfort, and companionship. She celebrated milestones, shared quiet moments, and supported the family in ways that went beyond simple assistance. Each interaction deepened the bond she had formed, creating a foundation of trust and love that was unshakable. The experience reminded her that relationships were built through presence, attention, and consistency. Throughout this time, she also maintained her own life, balancing responsibilities and routines with the new experiences and opportunities she had encountered. She discovered that it was possible to integrate the extraordinary into the ordinary, to bring lessons, insights, and fulfillment from one world into another. Her life had expanded not by chance but by the choices she had made and the courage she had shown. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that growth and learning never stopped, and that every moment held potential for connection and impact. In the quiet moments of reflection, she thought about the night she had found the baby alone in the alley. The fear, uncertainty, and urgency of that moment seemed distant now, yet its significance had only grown. That single act of courage had opened doors, created relationships, and set her on a path she could never have predicted. She realized that the power of compassion and courage was not measured by recognition or reward, but by the lives touched and the bonds formed. As she prepared to leave the mansion that evening, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The family had welcomed her, trusted her, and allowed her to be part of something extraordinary. She had learned about love, patience, empathy, and courage in ways that were deeply personal and transformative. Her life had changed, not because of wealth or opportunity alone, but because of the human connection that had been forged in a moment of crisis and nurtured through care and presence. Walking back through the quiet streets, she felt a sense of purpose and hope that she had never known. The journey was far from over, but she understood that she had already grown in ways that would shape her future. She had discovered the strength within herself to act with courage, the joy of building meaningful relationships, and the profound impact of compassion. The mansion, the family, and the baby had become part of her life in a way that was permanent. a reminder that one act of bravery could ripple outward and create lasting change. Her life had changed completely, but the transformation had come quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. She still remembered the night she had found the baby alone in the alley, shivering and scared. It had been an ordinary evening that turned extraordinary in a moment, and every decision she had made since then had been shaped by that experience. She had saved a life, yes, but what followed was even more remarkable. Doors she had never imagined were opening, and her world was expanding in ways she had never thought possible. After weeks of visits to the mansion, she found herself fully integrated into the family's life. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a trusted friend, someone whose presence brought comfort, guidance, and care. The baby's development was a source of joy for her, and she watched with pride as the child learned new skills, discovered new sensations, and smiled more confidently each day. Every little milestone felt like a shared achievement, a reflection of her role in nurturing and supporting the child's growth. The family recognized her dedication and kindness, and they offered her opportunities she had never dreamed of. They invited her to participate in philanthropic projects, helping children in need, and supporting community programs. At first she hesitated, unsure if she was capable of contributing in meaningful ways. But with gentle encouragement, she began to see that her compassion and courage were assets that could make a real difference. Each project she joined deepened her understanding of human need, broadened her perspective, and gave her a sense of purpose that extended far beyond herself. She also found herself learning new skills. From managing small events to understanding the organization of charitable work, every experience added to her confidence. She discovered that she was capable of much more than she had previously believed. Her life, once filled with routine and modest ambitions, was now rich with experiences that challenged her, inspired her, and allowed her to grow in ways she had never anticipated. The mansion, once an intimidating place, had become a second home, a space where learning, connection, and growth were constants. One day, the family asked her to accompany them on a trip to visit one of the projects they supported. It was a small village where children lacked access to education and basic necessities. She had never traveled outside her familiar city environment in such a purposeful way, and the experience was eye-opening. She met children who were eager to learn, families who struggled daily, and communities that thrived despite hardship. The gratitude, smiles, and curiosity of the children touched her deeply. She realized that her life had given her the tools, resources, and courage to make a difference, and that the act of saving one life had led to opportunities to touch many more. Her bond with the baby remained at the center of everything. She celebrated birthdays, small achievements, and quiet moments of connection. She sang lullabies, read stories, and played simple games, marveling at the joy in the child's eyes. The baby's laughter was a constant source of happiness, a reminder that love and care could create profound impact. She felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before, a quiet pride in knowing that her actions had helped shape a safe, happy, and nurturing environment for a life that depended on her. The family's gratitude went beyond words. They welcomed her into their home, included her in family gatherings, and trusted her opinions on important decisions. She felt seen, valued, and respected in ways that were entirely new. Their generosity was not measured solely by wealth, but by their openness, warmth, and the sincere desire to involve her in meaningful aspects of their lives. She learned that true kindness creates connections that go beyond circumstance, creating bonds that are enduring and deeply human. As her confidence grew, she began to dream bigger. She had once thought her ambitions were limited by her circumstances, but now she understood that courage, compassion, and dedication could open doors that had seemed firmly closed. She began planning ways to expand her influence, helping more children, supporting more families, and sharing her experiences to inspire others. The journey that began with saving a baby had grown into a mission, a commitment to using her abilities to improve lives in meaningful ways. Even in moments of quiet reflection, she could feel the profound changes within herself. She had learned to trust her instincts, to act decisively, and to embrace uncertainty with courage. She had discovered a deep reservoir of empathy, patience, and resilience. She had realized that heroism was not about recognition or fame. It was about being present, making choices guided by compassion and understanding that even small actions could have far-reaching consequences. Her life was now intertwined with the lives of others in ways she had never imagined, and that realization filled her with gratitude and hope. One evening, she sat in the garden of the mansion, watching the sunset cast golden light across the landscape. The baby was playing nearby, giggling as the family interacted, and she felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that dark alley to this moment had been extraordinary, filled with uncertainty, courage, and connection. She had saved a life, but in return, her life had been transformed. The experiences, relationships, and opportunities she had gained were beyond anything she had ever envisioned. The family gathered around her, expressing their appreciation and love. They spoke of how her actions had changed not only the baby's life but their own as well. They emphasized that her presence had become essential, that her compassion and dedication were valued beyond measure. She listened, moved by their words, understanding that the impact of her courage had extended far beyond the initial rescue. Her life, once ordinary, had become meaningful, rich, and full of purpose. She realized that the mansion, the family, and the opportunities before her were not merely material rewards but symbols of the trust, respect, and love that her actions had cultivated. The journey had taught her that life is shaped by moments of courage, choices guided by compassion, and the willingness to step into uncertainty to protect and nurture others. She understood that her path forward was one of continued growth, service, and connection, and that each day offered opportunities to make a difference. In the months that followed, she continued to live a life enriched by purpose and connection. She balanced her personal goals with her involvement in the family's initiatives, finding joy in both. She celebrated milestones, shared quiet moments of reflection, and continued to learn from the experiences she encountered. Every day reminded her that her actions mattered, that her presence could create positive change, and that the bonds formed through empathy and courage were enduring. She often thought back to the moment she had found the baby in the alley, remembering the fear, urgency, and instinct that had guided her. What seemed like a simple act had transformed into a life filled with connection, purpose, and opportunity. She had discovered the power of kindness, the importance of human connection, and the potential of one person's actions to ripple outward in ways beyond comprehension. The journey had begun with a single act of courage, but it had grown into a lifetime of impact, learning, and love. As she looked at the baby, now thriving and joyful, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that her life had been forever changed by a single moment of action, and that her courage had opened doors not only for the child, but for herself as well. She had discovered that the true value of life lies in the connections we make, the compassion we show, and the courage to act when it matters most. The journey from the alley to the mansion had been extraordinary, and she embraced the future with hope, gratitude, and a commitment to continue making a difference. Her story became a reminder to herself and others that life can change in an instant, that acts of bravery and kindness can create ripples far beyond what we can see, and that each of us has the power to impact the lives of others in meaningful ways. She had saved a baby, but in doing so, she had saved herself from a life of ordinary limitations. She had discovered courage, purpose, and the profound joy of human connection. And as she stepped into each new day, she carried with her the knowledge that one act of compassion could truly change everything. Months had passed since she first found the baby in the alley, and the bond between them and the family had grown even stronger. She had become more than a friend. She was now a mentor, a trusted presence in the baby's life, and a cherished member of the household. Each day brought new experiences, small triumphs, and shared laughter. She found herself deeply connected not only to the baby but to the family's values, their way of living, and their commitment to helping others. Life had expanded in ways she had never imagined, filled with warmth, learning, and purpose. One morning she woke up with a feeling of anticipation. Today the family had planned something special. They wanted to show her a project they had been working on, an initiative to support children in underprivileged communities. She had participated in small ways before, but today she would see the impact firsthand. As she traveled with them, she reflected on how her life had changed. From the moment she acted to save the baby, she had been stepping into a path she could not have anticipated. A path filled with challenges, joy, and meaningful connections. Arriving at the community center, she was immediately struck by the energy and enthusiasm of the children there. Their eyes lit up with curiosity and excitement as they noticed the visitors. She was introduced to several families, each sharing stories of their struggles and hopes. Her heart swelled with empathy as she listened, and she instinctively offered comfort, encouragement, and guidance. The same instincts that had guided her to protect the baby now helped her provide reassurance and care to others who needed it. She realized that courage and compassion were not limited to a single moment. They could extend into a lifetime of meaningful impact. The family guided her through the center, explaining the programs they had developed, including tutoring, recreational activities, and basic support for families in need. She saw children learning to read, creating art, and laughing freely. It was a vivid reminder that even small acts of support could have a significant effect. She joined in, helping with reading exercises, distributing supplies, and sharing moments of joy with the children. The experience left her both exhausted and exhilarated. She felt that every smile she helped create, every child encouraged, was a reflection of the values she had learned through her journey. As the day went on, she noticed a quiet moment where a young child looked at her and smiled, shy but trusting. In that instant, she felt a deep connection, a reminder that every act of kindness ripples outward. She realized that saving one life had not only changed the baby's path but had opened doors for countless others. Her courage, compassion, and willingness to act had multiplied into opportunities to touch many more lives. It was a realization that filled her with a sense of purpose she had never imagined possible. The family then invited her to a small gathering where volunteers and supporters shared their experiences. She listened to stories of dedication, sacrifice, and triumph. Hearing about the collective efforts reinforced her understanding of community, teamwork, and the importance of consistent care. She felt proud to be part of something greater than herself, knowing that her actions, once spontaneous and instinctive, had become part of a larger movement to make a difference. The recognition was humbling, but she remained focused on the children, understanding that true fulfillment came from the impact she could make rather than accolades or praise. Later, as the day came to a close, the family and the children gathered in a circle, sharing stories and expressing gratitude. She listened as each child spoke about their experiences, their joys, and their hopes for the future. The baby, now growing older, explored the space with curiosity, occasionally returning to her side for comfort and reassurance. She held the child close, feeling the steady weight and warmth, and thought about how far they had come together. Each moment reinforced her sense of responsibility and the power of nurturing, caring, and consistent attention. On the way back to the mansion, she reflected quietly on the journey. From a single act of bravery in a dark alley to becoming a trusted presence in the lives of a family and a community, her life had been transformed in ways she could not have predicted. She realized that her courage had created a chain reaction, extending far beyond the initial moment. She had discovered strength she had never known, opportunities to help others, and a deep sense of purpose that gave meaning to every day. That evening at the mansion, she spent time reviewing plans for future initiatives with the family. They discussed programs to expand educational opportunities, support health and nutrition, and create safe spaces for children to learn and play. She contributed ideas drawing from her own experiences, instincts, and insights gained through her journey. The family welcomed her input, valuing her perspective as both a friend and someone with first-hand experience of courage and care. She felt a sense of belonging and influence she had never anticipated, understanding that her actions could shape the lives of many in lasting ways. In the weeks that followed, she continued to engage actively with both the baby and the broader projects. She balanced her time, sometimes focused on the household, other times on community initiatives. She found joy in the small everyday moments, playing with the baby, watching children learn, seeing families smile, and sharing experiences with the family who had embraced her. Each day was filled with lessons in patience, empathy, and courage. She realized that life's greatest rewards often came not from wealth or recognition, but from the meaningful connections and contributions she could make. Her story became an inspiration, quietly spreading among those she encountered. People she met were moved by her courage, her commitment, and her ability to transform a single act of bravery into a life of service and impact. She became a symbol of what one person's compassion could achieve, not through grand gestures or fame, but through consistent, thoughtful, and empathetic action. She understood that true heroism is often quiet, personal, and transformative. As she watched the sunset from the mansion's garden one evening, holding the baby close, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been extraordinary, filled with challenges, discoveries, and connections that had reshaped her life. She had saved a life, found purpose, and embraced opportunities to make a positive impact in ways she could never have imagined. The mansion, the family, and the children she supported were not just part of her experiences. They were part of her heart and her ongoing story. She understood that life's moments of courage and compassion could create a lasting legacy. By acting in that one critical moment, she had not only changed the baby's path but had created ripples that extended far beyond. She felt a renewed commitment to continue her work, support others, and nurture the values she had discovered. Every smile, every small victory, every connection she fostered was a reminder of the power of love, courage, and empathy. Her journey from that first night in the alley to the present moment in the mansion was a testament to the extraordinary potential of ordinary people. She had learned that bravery is not always loud, that kindness is not measured by recognition, and that a single action can create waves of change beyond imagination. She embraced each day with gratitude, purpose, and a deep understanding of what it means to touch lives meaningfully. As the baby slept peacefully in her arms, she felt a sense of quiet confidence and hope. Her actions had brought love, safety, and opportunity to a vulnerable life, and in return her own life had been transformed. She had discovered her strengths, embraced her potential, and become part of a community that valued and nurtured her. The story that began with a moment of courage had grown into a lifetime of purpose, impact, and connection, proving that even the smallest acts can lead to extraordinary change.